Good morning. Thank you, Jerry. We are in the book of Acts. We are looking at life of the Apostle Paul toward the end of the book of Acts now, as he has been apprehended for his own safety. He's been rescued from mob violence there in Jerusalem, and the fact that he was willing to explain that Christ made a difference in his life and told him to go to the Gentiles, set them off, and they're ready to tear him limb from limb. Now, they take him to in incarceration, but they're protective custody, we would call it. And we have just found out that there were more than 40 of these seemingly dedicated Jews who, and this is always amazing to me, that you're so dedicated to your religion that you're ready to kill people. This says something about your religion. I don't know, it just is so out of place when you read the Bible, you know. But they have made the conspiracy, and they pledged to themselves and to others that they would neither eat nor drink until they killed him. So we find that this is going to be a very strict diet for them because Paul escapes. Well, we come to chapter 23, verse 14. We see the rulers, and they, the conspirators, came to the chief priests and elders and said, "We have bound ourselves under a great curse, that we will eat nothing until we have slain Paul." So this is not something they're hiding from the higher-ups. Under a great curse is Strong's exhaustive concordance, which takes all the words in the King James Version and puts a number next to them. You can look in the back and look up the Greek word or the Hebrew word, so you don't need to learn the language to explore a little more deeply the meaning of the words. I have online Bible on my computer at home and on my phone, and so as I'm reading along in the scripture, I can hit the S number, which is the Strong's number. That comes up, and by pressing that, it opens up the lexicon. So it's all automated. I don't even have to turn pages. But it's one of those things that's been a great help to understand some of the depth of this. And this, under this great curse, is anathema. You've perhaps heard of that, old term, but the idea of being accursed. We have bound is anathematize, the verb form. So we have anathematized ourselves under a great anathema. And so they understood that. And this was a curse, a pledge, a devotional pledge. And then the ruse. So the reason they're telling the rulers is, we need you to help us lure him out. Now therefore, ye with the council signify to the chief captain that he bring him down unto you tomorrow, as though ye would inquire something more perfectly concerning him. And we, or ever he come near, before he comes near, are ready to kill him. Council here again, the Sanhedrin, and this means that this is the official body of this religious group, and they are happy to be complicit in a plot for murder. Well, we find the plot was foiled. We see the plot reported to the apostle. And when Paul's sister's son, indicating that Paul's sister, he grew up in Jerusalem, being tutored by Gamaliel, one of the most famous of the Jewish rabbis of the day. But his sister also had been brought over, so she's already married, has a child. So the sister's son heard of their lying in wait. So I don't, 40 men talking about this and sharing their pledge with the rulers and so on. So people are talking about this, and the boy, and he seems to be a child, was all ears. So he heard of their lying in wait. He went and entered into the castle and told Paul. Evidently, protective custody didn't forbid him from getting visitors. The plot repeated to the authorities. Paul's nephew was taken to the captain. We see this by Paul sent the boy with the centurion. Then Paul called one of the centurions unto him. Now you remember that he's already revealed that he's a Roman citizen, which means he has great privileges, and you dare not slight him, or he can report you to the emperor's government, and you could be on the receiving end of the penalties. So he calls over one of the centurions and said, Bring this young man unto the chief captain, for he hath a certain thing to tell him. Now, that doesn't sound like an emergency thing, but we see the level of respect that Paul has because he's a Roman citizen here. And Paul sent the boy to the captain. So he took him, the centurion took the boy, and brought him to the chief captain and said, Paul, the prisoner, called me unto him and prayed me, asked me, to bring this young man unto thee, who hath something to say unto thee. So Paul the prisoner, Vincent's word study points this out. Paul, as a Roman citizen, was held in custodia militaris, military custody. You have to say it in the Latin to sound erudite, I guess. 3 kinds of custody were recognized by the Roman law. Custodia publica, public custody, confinement in the public jail. This was the worst kind, the common jails being wretched dungeons. Such was the confinement of Paul and Silas at Philippi. Then custodia libera, free custody, confined to men of high rank. This is like being on probation. The accused was committed to the charge of a magistrate or senator who became responsible for his appearance on the day of trial. And then this one, custodia militaria, the military custody, the accused man was placed in charge of a soldier who was responsible for his life, for the prisoner's safekeeping, and whose left hand was secured by a chain to the prisoner's right. The prisoner was usually kept in the barracks, but was sometimes allowed to reside in a private house under the charge of his guard. So the man that he called was not the man chained to him, but the leader of that group, the centurion. The man was over 100 of the soldiers. Now we follow the nephew. Paul's nephew was talked to by the captain. I like the captain because of the way he's dealing with this boy. Delicate retirement. Then the chief captain took him by the hand. This is why, he's not a teenager here. He's not a grown-up boy. He's a young boy. Took him by the hand, went with him aside privately and asked him, What is that thou hast to tell me? Then the deceptive request. And he said, The Jews have agreed to desire thee that thou wouldest bring down Paul tomorrow into the council, as though they would inquire somewhat of him more perfectly. This is almost word for word what the conspirators had asked the Jews to do. And again, council is Sanhedrin. Then the deadly rebellion. But do not thou yield unto them, for there lie in wait for him of them more than 40 men, which have bound themselves with an oath that they will neither eat nor drink till they have killed him. And now they are ready, looking for a promise from thee. Do yield is the aorist passive of to persuade. Do not be persuaded, you see, by the request of the council. Paul's nephew was trusted by the captain. There was something about his earnestness, something about his precociousness, something about the fact that he is forthright and brave in talking to the captain. So the chief captain Then let the young man depart, and charged him, See thou tell no man that thou hast showed these things to me. Secrecy was of great importance here, lest they come in, storm the castle, whatever the thing would be, but be very, very quiet. So immediately he makes plans to take Paul away for his own safety. The night journey to Caesarea. Paul dispatched to Caesarea, and we see the full escort, really a powerful army. And he called unto him, evidently immediately, 2 centurions. This meaning leader of 200 soldiers, saying, Make ready 200 soldiers to go to Caesarea, and horsemen 70. Score is 20, so 70 men. And spearmen 200 at the 3rd hour of the night. Barbara Bowen wrote a book called Strange Scriptures. She says, The gates are closed at sunset and not opened until sunrise. This is just protection of the city, why they have walls around the city. This is still the case in all eastern walled cities, she said at the time of writing. When once the gates were shut, they would not be opened except to admit a great official who might be on an errand of importance. The chief captain sends Paul from Caesarea at the 3rd hour of the night, about 9 p.m. The night begins at 6 p.m. A wise precaution, because no one could possibly pursue them until the gates were opened at about 6 the next morning. The apostle therefore had 9 hours start, which made it impossible for anyone to overtake him on the way. So interesting technique here. He knows exactly when to leave and to secrete, how many was that? 200 soldiers, 200 spearmen, all these, this huge, rather, army. And the protection arranged, and provide them beasts that they may set Paul on, and bring him safe unto Felix the governor. We see here that accompanying the prisoner is a fair epistle. The captain explains recent proceedings. Now you recognize, since we have been there watching from the eyes of Luke, the author, he puts a little spin on it for his own sake. The captain's statement, and he wrote a letter after this manner. The captain's salutation, Claudius Lysias, his name, unto the most excellent governor Felix, sendeth greeting. I always thought it made more sense to write letters like this than we do. If you get a letter and it doesn't have a return address on it, so you don't know exactly who said it, who wrote it, you look at the end of the thing. You have to skip to the last chapter to see who wrote it. So this began with, so Nancy Tunis unto, you start out right that, I know her. So sendeth greeting, and then the captive saved. This man that I'm delivering to you was taken of the Jews and should have been killed of them, and then came I with an army and rescued him, having understood that he was a Roman. A little later, I found out he was a Roman, but I rescued him. The council summoned, and when I would have known the cause wherefore they accused him, I brought him forth unto the council, again Sanhedrin. The captain exonerated the rescued prisoner without criminal activity, whom I perceived to be accused of questions of their law, not of Roman law, not of criminality, but to have nothing laid to his charge worthy of death or of bonds. So I want you to make a mental note of this, that when he's first sent away to Caesarea and put in the jail there is no charge against him. This, again, is protective custody. So, notice the first official record of Paul's arrest carries no criminal charge against him. So why am I sending him? Well, with conspiratorial attack. But when it was told me how that the Jews laid wait for the man, I sent straightway to thee, and gave commandment to his accusers also to say before thee what they had against him. Farewell. So the idea here is, I'm turning this over to you, which the rulers were the judges, primarily. And so the judgment of this, the sorting of it out, is up to you. Then Paul detained at Caesarea. We find him moved from Jerusalem to Caesarea, coming from the high mountain area, Mount Zion of Jerusalem. They go down to the coast of Caesarea. We see the journey, first of all, the trip to Antipatris. Then the soldiers, as it was commanded them, took Paul and brought him by night to Antipatris. From there, the trip to Caesarea. On the morrow, they left the horsemen to go with him and return to the castle. So the soldiers were there to fight off anybody that might have found out that he was being taken away. Since that did not happen, they just left him with the horsemen. And then the transfer to Felix, who, when they came to Caesarea and delivered the epistle to the governor, presented Paul also before him. So you imagine in the TV and movies where you're transferring the prisoner, so that's all official and it's done. So we see the judge. Here, determining particulars. And when the governor had read the letter, he asked of what province he was. And when he understood that he was of Cilicia, so Tarsus was a city in the area of Cilicia, out in Asia Minor, a famous city, Tarsus. And determining procedure, I will hear thee, said he, when thine accusers are also come. And he commanded him to be kept in Herod's judgment hall. All right, we find him then settled safely in jail. So not an ideal situation, but still he's not being murdered by these people. Now this actually brings us to the end of a section. So we take the time to review here. We see Paul's first missionary journey was 13 to 1428, the Jerusalem Council 15:1 to 1535, second missionary journey 1536 to 1822. Paul's third missionary journey was 1823 to 2116, and then Paul's final visit to Jerusalem, which we've just concluded, 2117 to 2335. Now we come to this next section, which I give you in brighter letters, Felix, Festus, and Agrippa. These are the people who are going to listen to him accounting these things. So we find, first of all, Paul before Felix. Antonius Felix, Tony Felix, AD 52 to 57. Easton Bible Dictionary talks about this man. Felix, which means happy, felicitous, that type of word. The Roman procurator of Judea, before whom Paul reasoned, he appeared to have expected a bribe from Paul, and therefore had several interviews with him. We're going to actually hear that from the mouth of Luke. The worthy deeds referred to in 24:2 was his clearing of the country of banditti and impostors. At the end of 2 years' term, Porcius Festus was appointed in the room in the place of Felix, who proceeded to Rome, was there accused of cruelty and malversation, evil conduct, misbehavior in office, like fraud, breach of trust, maybe expecting bribes of office by the Jews of Caesarea. The accusation was rendered nugatory. They gave him a noogie on his head by the influence of his brother Pallas with Nero. Drusilla, the daughter of Herod Agrippa, having been induced by Felix to desert her husband, the king of Emesa, became his adulterous companion. She was seated beside him when Paul reasoned before the judge. When Felix gave place to Festus, being willing to do the Jews a pleasure, he left Paul bound. So every duty of honor would be to examine this man, and when there was no Roman law even charged against him, he should have let him go, and that with some protection until he was out of the hands of the Jews. But he did not. Josephus, the famous Jewish historian writing to the Romans, in his work, Antiquities of the Jews, said, "Now when Porcius Festus was sent as successor to Felix by Nero, the principal of the Jewish inhabitants of Caesarea went up to Rome to accuse Felix." They actually traveled all the way there. I'm going to guess that this holding of Paul in safety was one of the main things that they were upset by. He had certainly been brought to punishment unless Nero, so Festus, or Festus would have been, no, Felix would have been brought to punishment by those accusations unless Nero had yielded to the importunate, the oft-repeated solicitations of his brother Pallas, who was at this time in the greatest honor by him. Two of the principal Syrians in Caesarea persuaded Burrhus, who was Nero's tutor and secretary for his Greek epistles, by giving him a great sum of money to disannul the equality of the Jewish privileges of citizenship which they hitherto enjoyed. So Burrhus, by his solicitations, obtained leave of the emperor that an epistle should be written to that purpose. This epistle became the occasion for the following miseries that befell our nation, Josephus says of the Jews. For when the Jews of Caesarea were informed of the contents of this epistle to the Syrians, they were more disorderly than before, till a war was kindled. So, you could press these people only so far. Now we find the accusation. The prosecution spokesman. "And after 5 days, Ananias the high priest descended from the elevation of Jerusalem down to the coast with the elders and with a certain orator." They got a spokesman here named Tertullus, who informed the governor against Paul. So the Jews, being little acquainted with Roman forms and laws, had to employ Roman orators as advocates. They knew how to get the words through. So I want you to notice the propaganda speech. This is heavily skewed to accomplish what he wanted. How it was summarized. First of all, flattery, and this for at least 4 things. Keeping the peace, and when he was called forth, Tertullus began to accuse him. Paul began his accusation by saying, "Seeing that by thee," he says to Festus, "we enjoy great quietness. You are great at keeping the peace. Secondly, building the country, and that very worthy deeds are done unto this nation by thy providence." As was mentioned earlier, the worthy deeds seem to be he had cleared out the bands of bandits and impostors. I'm not sure what that referred to. Then the third compliment, earning the praise, "We accept it always and in all places, most noble Felix, with all thankfulness." Is this getting a little deep? Is this getting a little sugary for you? And then the fourth one, hearing the case. "Notwithstanding that I be not further tedious unto thee, giving you all these praises, I pray thee that thou wouldest hear us of thy clemency a few words. You have clemency to us by listening to the problems we have here." So pray is parakaleo. We pray you, we exhort you, we encourage you, we comfort you by saying we're going to speak in a few words. So first was the flattery, then came the falsehood. And we find here, first of all, is deliberate deception. Paul accused of sedition, which is being a traitor. "For we have found this man a pestilent fellow and a mover of sedition among all the Jews throughout the world." Then Paul accused of sectarianism and a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. So a ringleader is, a troublemaker. Then Paul accused of sacrilege, who also hath gone about to profane the temple, whom we took and would have judged according to our law. So, deliberate deception. Now, I don't know that Tertullus knew anything about this, but this was the stock complaint of the Jews. And if they had actually checked it out and found out, they would have found that there were no Gentiles in the temple. It had not been defiled. So we see the deliberate deception. Then we see the deliberate distortion, skewing, as the captain's letter had skewed it a little for his favor, this one skews it the other way. We see the captain caused us injury where we were hurt. But the chief captain Lysias came upon us and with great violence took him away out of our hands. We were handling it, you see. And then the captain caused us inconvenience, commanding his accusers to come unto thee, by examining of whom thyself mayest take knowledge of all these things whereof we accuse him. So that was how it was summarized, and then how it was supported. And the Jews also assented. You can see the in-group, they're going, that's it, saying that these things were so. Well, that allowed then Paul's defense. And I want you to notice, here's a man who knows that he's done the right thing, that he did not do wrong things, that this is a prejudice against him that has brought him here, and discrimination to a great degree. So we see Paul's defense, and we see Paul's confidence. Then Paul, after that the governor had beckoned unto him to speak, answered, Forasmuch as I know that thou hast been of many years a judge unto this nation, I do the more cheerfully answer for myself. He says, you've been around, you know how these people are. I don't have to tell you anything new about this. So first of all, the time factor. Because that thou mayest understand that there are yet but 12 days since I went up to Jerusalem for to worship. He says, all this stuff I'm supposed to be doing, sedition, sectarianism, defiling, sacrilege, and all that, he says, pretty hard to crowd that into 12 days. The truth factor, no disputation or dissension in the temple, and they neither found me in the temple disputing with any man, neither raising up the people. He says, I was there worshiping. I was there trying to finish a vow with some others. Secondly, no disputation or dissension in the synagogue, neither in the synagogues. So it wasn't at the temple, wasn't in the synagogues. No disputation or dissension in the city, nor in the city. He says, no place there was I causing anything that they're talking about. And then no deposition or documentation in their accusations. Neither can they prove the things whereof they now accuse me. Now, this is a pretty smart concept. He's a Roman citizen. And it takes proof, not accusations. Hopefully that's true for us in our court system as well. Now, at this point, he is going to make a confession of what this is really all about. So we'll get to that next time as God allows. So we'll find out what he says. Here's what's really going on. All right, comments or questions?